Hey guys, welcome back. My name's LT, and today we're going to be doing things just a little bit different than usual. We're right smack dab in the middle of an LS swap on this 98 Cherokee XJ. But I just realized we crossed the 40,000 subscriber milestone. So first I wanted to say thank you to each and every one of you. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for the support. But I also realized it's just been over a year since I really started focusing on this YouTube channel. I started it, my first regular upload was February 2020. And at the time, I think I had like 250 subscribers. So it's come a long way since then. And I figured this would be the perfect opportunity because I had always planned on doing sort of a start to finish build recap of what is my most popular project. That's the Ugly Truck. So it was all based on this premise of I would much rather have a vehicle that is mechanically sound and performs well and has a really crappy paint job than I would have, you know, say a show vehicle, something that is really slick and shiny, but you know, it's got a stock engine or it's all worn out underneath. So I went shopping, I put my money where my mouth was, and I started looking for just old, dingy, beat up work trucks. I was kind of back and forth between the GMT 400 and the GMT 800 platform because those are basically my two favorites. And I kind of landed on the GMT 800 basically because of the LS platform, and it had all the ingredients of a good budget-oriented performance truck. So I went down to Alabama and I bought what would eventually become known as the Ugly Truck.
And there it is, a 2000 Chevy Silverado 1500. Now, if you know me, you know this thing's got a 5.3 LS underneath the hood because, well, shoot, what else would you start with? From the outside, this thing does not look great. It looks like it spent most of its life out in the sun, which it apparently has. I picked this thing up down in Alabama, and typical of GM, the paint on the hood, the clear coat is completely faded, but for the most part, the body is actually pretty straight. But rust-free is the one thing that I needed to find, and that's why I went south. I looked all around Tennessee for a vehicle that was not rusty, and I just couldn't find them. I looked at 3 or 4 trucks, and they all had the rocker panels rotted out or the bed sides rotted out. Just not something that I really wanted to take the time to deal with. Now, this truck, yeah, dented up. As you can see, the rear quarter panel, this is probably the worst part of the whole thing. It looks like somebody tried to kind of bash it back out with a hammer. Yeah, it doesn't look great, but that's all right. Now the transmission, that's where things get a little tricky, because remember, second gear is gone. So I got to drop it down to first gear, kind of get into a little bit, and I'll bump it up to third, kind of let the vehicle coast for a minute until it skips second, shifts right into third gear, and then you're good to go. Get some junk tires, we might as well put them to good use, right? Hold it right there, about 4,000 RPM. Make your nose around. And we'll roll it out. Still spinning. There we go. Man, you just can't beat it. It's a good time. Spinning both tires that time for a minute. Doesn't get any better than that.
Even though it was a ton of fun just driving around and doing burnouts with a stock truck that only had first and third gear, obviously we had to take care of the transmission. And I had a decision to make, either stick with the 4L60 or convert to something a little bit stronger like the 4L80. And ultimately, as you probably know, that's the choice that I took, was a 4L80. Now at the time, I actually didn't know that I was going to end up putting a big block in the Ugly Truck. I had just known that I was going to have a lot more power. And I think my original plan back in, you know, March or so of that year, I was going to just put a big turbo on the 5.3, just kind of what people usually do. So obviously the stock 4L60 or a new stock 4L60 still wasn't going to be the ideal transmission. So I did a little bit of looking, and obviously the 4L80 is the obvious automatic transmission to throw in there. So I went to a local junkyard, I picked one up, and I swapped it out.
right, this is a real quick burnout test of the 4L80 swap, 342 gears, sort of open differential. Let's give it a go. Need more power. That's all I can say about that.
Now, part of the reason why it earned the nickname the Ugly Truck has to do with the faded paint and the dents, but it more has to do with all the accessories that the previous owner had installed. It's kind of like they had won a $1,000 gift card to AutoZone and they could only spend it in the chrome accessory aisle because it had, I mean, just about everything. It had some chrome tube steps, even though it's a low two-wheel drive truck. Had those weird silver and red Euro tail lights. Had the chrome venti visors, the chrome stick-on fake vent that sits right there on the fender. Some weird fake headlights. It was missing the bow tie on the front. So just when you combine the appearance of the truck with all the accessories that the previous owner had installed, I mean, like I said, that's why it earned the nickname the Ugly Truck, because it was horrendous. And it had those awful steel 17-inch wheels that they put on the little bit newer trucks. The overall package, it just did not look good. So the next thing that I had to do was make it look just a little bit better. When I purchased Ugly Truck, it had 324,000 miles on the odometer. And in those 324,000 miles, I don't think anybody ever did any maintenance or replacement on the front or rear suspension for that matter. It was shot. It had so much play in it. I think I remember one of the ball joints, you could probably move it in and out like a quarter of an inch. And when I drove it back from Alabama on 65, first of all, it was kind of sketchy because there was no overdrive. I was stuck in third gear, so it was revving up really high. And second of all, I mean, you're kind of doing this with a steering wheel just to maintain a straight line. So just for safety's sake, I had to rebuild the front suspension. And since I was in there, we also lowered it at the same time.
Truck like this one.
Like this one?
All right. But I like it I want to drive one exactly like it. Like exactly like it right now, except for the wheels are on.
Oh, wheels on would be important, wouldn't it?
And I would want to take off the bed forever.
You're silly.
After taking care of the stance and throwing on some 2015 Silverado wheels and tires, I really haven't changed much on the outside of Ugly Truck since then. There's a few things, here and there. I think I put some 2003 and newer taillights on it. I did upgrade the headlights to something that's, not faded. You can actually see through. I put a little bow tie on the front end. But other than that, the appearance remains pretty much unchanged. I just tried to clean it up as best I could. But the next thing I wanted to do was change the rear end ratio because it had 342s in it, and when you combined those 342s with a 4L80's first gear, which is like 248 to 1, with a 5.3 that doesn't make a whole lot of torque, it just was a dog off the line. There was just no get up and go until you're moving like 20, 25 miles an hour. So we're swapping the 342s out for something a little bit more aggressive. And obviously you have some choices. 373 is a good all-around gear, but it's not that different from 342s. I thought about 390s or 410s, but I figured, you know what, let's just go big or go home. So I threw some 430s in there, which at the time was a really good gear, but I had no idea that I would end up going the route that I went with the turbo big block. So I might actually switch back to the 342s at some point, but with the 5.3 and the 4L80, those 430s, they were spot on.
So the other day I was unable to get this thing to do a proper burnout where you just sit and spin your tires because we got no power. So we're going to do the next best things you can with 430s and a Detroit True Track. Donuts. Come on, truck. There we go. Can't go to the edge. Try that again. Getting dizzy. Woo! Getting dizzy and motion sick.
So around 2200. Then when I give you the thumbs up, you know what to do. At the end of the run, let off the gas, let it slow down, and then bump it into neutral, no brakes.
Alrighty. All right, I'm good here. Look, it went over 100.
233.
233 at the wheels. What was the torque? Right, we did 233.
96.
233 horse and 296 pounds of torque. Not bad for a stock 5.3.
If you're going to be increasing the power of any car or truck, it's a good idea to know kind of where you're starting so you can measure your improvement. So once we got it off the dyno, we knew where we were making in terms of horsepower at the wheels. It was time to make a decision about how we're going to increase the power. Now, like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, my first thought was just to turbocharge the 5.3 that was in there. It's very popular, it's very common, easy to do, and you can make all kinds of power. And the engines, they'll hold up remarkably well to a big turbo on there. But I realized that I didn't want to take the path of least resistance. I didn't want to do the same thing that everybody else does on a Silverado just like that. So I thought engine swap, that's the next logical choice. But what do you swap in when you have what is probably the most commonly swapped engine of all time? I mean, obviously we're doing a 6-liter swap right here. So a 6-liter was one of my thoughts, but again, it's totally not original, totally not different. The second place option that I almost went with, which I think I still will try on another vehicle, was the GM Atlas 4200 inline 6. They're an inline 6 4.2 liter, and they sound really, really cool at high RPM and under boost, but I just didn't feel like it was right for this particular truck. I think the 4200 would be better equipped for like a really lightweight car. So who knows, I might revisit that in the future, but the engine that ultimately wound up going under the hood of Ugly Truck was an 8.1 496 cubic inch big block. I wrapped up the installation of the 8.1 sometime in August of 2020. And the thing was a blast to drive with the 430s, the big block, and the 4L80. Now, admittedly on the highway, the RPMs were probably a little bit higher than what would be ideal, but the thing was great. I drove it around for a little bit, but in mid-August, just a few weeks after I finished the conversion, we were actually moving cross country. I lived in Tennessee at the time, and I've got a whole video on the channel, I'll kind of link in the corner or whatever, explaining why we moved from Tennessee to Utah, but that was the very next thing that we had to do. So we got the truck loaded up and we booked it across the state. So I actually didn't get to dyno it on the same dyno that I did the 5.3, but luckily it was a same brand, a Dynocom. So I'm figuring the numbers should be pretty, apples to apples in terms of the comparison. So the very next thing that I did as soon as I landed in Utah and got comfortable is I headed up to Idaho to the shop that I actually used to work at, the shop I helped start, and we threw it on the dyno and we got some numbers.
Inverter's locked. And all right, that's 2.
All right, that was 306 and 429. Not bad at all. Not bad.
Second gear. Third gear. Inverter is locked. Good. Rev limit of 5,500. How'd we do?
Looks like you ran it a little farther this time.
Yeah, I did.
But 305.7, you're within 1 horse. Within 1.5 foot-pounds. That's perfect.
305 horsepower and 427 pounds of torque at the wheels is definitely a blast. It was fun to drive, especially with the 430s and the True Track in the back. The thing would spin the tires really comfortably in first and second gear. But I knew I needed more, and turbochargers have always been my power adder of choice. If I could pick anything, it's always going to be a turbo. So obviously there's no off-the-shelf kit for an 8.1 in a Silverado, especially a Silverado 1500. And the most common suggestion you'd see people make is just do a remote mount. Remote mount turbos are so simple. And yeah, it would have been simple to install, but I don't like remote mount turbos. I hate how the oil system is down below the level in the oil pan. You have to run the scavenge pump. There's some opportunities for damage, like let's say if you run over something in the road, you've got an oil line running underneath for a feed. There's just a lot of headaches or potential headaches I didn't want to deal with. So I knew I had to custom build a turbo setup. Now, the actual turbo that we wound up going with is a VS Racing S480. Had a 132 AR, I think it was like a 96 millimeter turbine wheel, T6 flange on the exhaust housing. It's a really big turbo, weighs like 50 pounds. And part of the reason why I went with such a large turbo is because I had a final horsepower goal of 1,000 horsepower. And then number 2, I wanted to be able to comfortably run it at a low boost level. And a small turbo, it's going to make a lot of exhaust back pressure. So I wanted to let that thing breathe. That's why I went with a little bit larger turbo. I mean, we've got 500 cubic inches. There's plenty of airflow to spool that thing up. And then we installed a 60 millimeter wastegate also to help the thing run at low boost while the engine is stock. It took a while to get everything built. We started with a stock driver's side exhaust manifold and we welded some, I think we used 2.5 inch Schedule 40 mild steel weld pipe. It took about 2 months maybe to get everything done, kind of working on and off between the ugly truck and some other projects, but we finally got it done. The big turbo, it fit under the hood, had plenty of clearance for everything, and it worked great. With all the fabrication taken care of on the turbo kit, the very last thing that we had to do before we could do a test drive was upgrade the fuel system. The 8.1 uses, I'm pretty sure, 24 or somewhere like 28 pound injectors, and we stepped those up in a major way. We installed some FIC 1000cc injectors, and on gasoline at around 60 psi of fuel pressure, it'll support, I think, like 1150 or 1200 horsepower at the wheels. So injectors, one and done. We've got plenty of fuel flow there. Now in the tank, I took out the stock single pump and I installed a Walbro 340. And that probably by itself won't be able to support the 1000 horsepower goal that I have ultimately, but it'll work fine on the stock bottom end. And then whenever I do build the motor a little bit later on, well, then I'll just have to either add a second pump or maybe put on the rail just a big massive single fuel pump or something like that. But for now, 1000cc injectors and the Walbro 340 will get the job done. I'm always nervous when it comes to the first test drive on a vehicle that you've built because you have so many hours and dollars invested in this project, and this is the time where it all needs to work or it all is going to fall apart. It's the first test drive, and needless to say, I was really nervous, but luckily everything went really smoothly. I ended up tuning the truck entirely by myself, which I was so nervous about. I hate tuning, but luckily I was able to get it done and get it dialed in pretty safe. So the first couple pulls that I did, I'm like, what's gonna happen here? Because I had no idea if the thing was gonna spike to all kinds of boost pressure. The wastegate I bought only had 2 springs in it, and it didn't tell you at what boost level the 2 springs were. And I read some reviews online where guys said the stiff spring would give you like 30 pounds of boost. And that would like instantly grenade this 8.1. So needless to say, the first couple pulls, I just went real easy on it. I was rolling the boost quickly. I'm gonna watch a bunch of stuff and go from there. Good fuel pressure, it's a little rich. No big puff out the tailgate, or tailpipe rather. I think we're good. But luckily the wastegate was perfect at 5 pounds. It bypassed all the exhaust around the turbine like it should. And then I started dialing in the fuel mixtures. All right guys, 3rd gear. Oh boy. Turbo big block, gotta love it. It's running a 3-bar speed density operating system, so I peeled back all the timing and I left it run really rich, and we just started tuning it. We started dialing it in with the wideband until the air fuels and the timing were kind of where I thought was a pretty safe, pretty conservative level, and then we hit the dyno. Whoa! Hold on, truck. Getting a little squirrely. So, on 8 pounds of boost, the numbers, final numbers at the rear wheels, 483 horsepower and 619 pounds of torque before the stock 8.1 306 horses, and 428 pounds of torque. That's a gain at the rear wheels of 177 horsepower and 191 pounds of torque. Super happy with how it turned out. So now we'll get loaded up and go back home. After getting the truck off the dyno, I was really happy with the power and especially the torque numbers that it made. And so we brought it back home and I drove it around for a couple of days. Obviously, you got to do a celebratory burnout or two. And I've just been enjoying the truck. I haven't done a whole lot since then. I did put some sway bars on it because we are going to be taking it to the Pro Touring Truck Shootout in April, which is like, I think only like 3 weeks from now. So I did a Beltex solid front anti-sway bar and a Hellwig rear sway bar, which definitely tightened up the handling. And I think I got to tighten it up, or loosen rather, the rear sway bar, because on the burnout video that I will have just played, toward the end, it had a little bit of a weird snap oversteer, which it hadn't ever done before with no sway bar on the back. So I think I'm going to loosen the sway bar on the back just so it's a little bit more pliable, if you will. But anyway, I've just been driving the truck and enjoying it, and it is a blast. I know I haven't done a whole lot of content on the truck since I did the sway bars, and I'll do another video of it. Number one, I'm going to get rid of the stock tires that are on there in a big smoky burnout. And I do have a new set of tires that's actually sitting right there off camera. That's going to go on the stock 18-inch wheels. So I'll show you guys that before the Pro Touring Truck Shootout. And the next upload next week, we'll be back to normal. We'll be back working on the XJ Cherokee, finishing it, or not finishing the LS swap, but we're going to be making more progress. We're going to get the stock 231 transfer case hooked up to the 4L60 in there. So I just got to say thanks for watching this video to the end. I hope you enjoyed the recap, the start to finish build of the Ugly Truck, because I had a blast building it. It's one of those things that just the idea kind of materializes and it snowballs in your head. And luckily I was able to take that idea and actually turn it into a reality. So I enjoyed building it. Hope you enjoyed watching it. Hope you enjoyed this recap. So a couple things I need you to do. Number one, if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. We want to reach 100,000 subscribers by the end of 2021. And I know we're going to make that happen, but I do need your help. Number two, like this video if you haven't already, if you enjoyed the content. And number three, head on over to TollmanPerformance.com, especially if you like the Ugly Truck, because we got some merchandise up there. We got some cool t-shirts. We've got this one here, which is the Ugly Truck on an American flag background. And I mean, come on, what's more patriotic than a big block Silverado in front of an American flag doing burnouts? So thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you back next week.